The definition of a boycott is two parts. The first is a verb, so to withdraw from commercial or social relations with a country, organization, or person as a punishment or protest. As a noun, it is a punitive ban that forbids relations with certain groups, cooperation with a policy, or the handling of goods. So the important thing to know is what makes a successful boycott. There are 7 factors that go into making a successful boycott. The first is the economic impact. So boycotts hurt businesses by cutting off profits, forcing change, like the Montgomery bus system, which relied heavily on black ridership. So when there was a boycott, it very strongly affected their business model. The second is community organization. It is very important that the people who are boycotting use a network and are a community group acting all in a similar way. So groups, pre-existing networks, churches, the NAACP, new groups, coordinated mass participation. We were involved in the mass blackout recently, setting up things like carpools for the bus boycotts and ways that people can get around the inconveniences of the boycott are also really, really important. In addition to that, it requires some level of strategic leadership. There needs to be a group of people who are paying attention and coordinating everything that's going on. A lot of times there are going to be a lot of moving pieces. If you're talking about, I know I'm sticking with the bus boycott, all the different buses, all the different routes, getting people to all the different places that they need to go takes some leadership and some strategy. So that's important. This is really important, and that is nonviolent discipline. Boycotts are one of those things similar to a sit-in or a protest event that can instigate violence against participants. And it's really important to understand and have the discipline to hold your line and be nonviolent. Once we react to violence with violence, we lose the moral authority, and then it becomes a riot. And it is not good for the movement at that point because people will not take us seriously. If they see peaceful protesters being beaten by police, then the judgment is clear who's on the right side and who's not. So that discipline is very important. In the civil rights movements, they would train people sitting at lunch counters and having people verbally and physically assault them and spit on them and harass them, trying to get a rise out of them. And those kinds of workshops, so that when you get into the real world and are doing it, you understand what to do and how to react in the most positive way. There are legal and political pressures related to this, so that's one of the other factors that you'll need to contend with. There are often legal challenges which can be combined with economic pressure and court rulings, which can work both ways. They can work to get what we want, the way the courts overturned segregation, but it can also work against us because there are ways that we are impacting people's livelihood, property, and money that can, cause legal jeopardy for protesters. The next important thing is the idea of unity and sacrifice. It's important that a boycott isn't going to be successful if people start peeling off and people stop doing the boycott, in exactly the same way that a strike isn't going to be successful if the striking workers become scabs and start peeling off. So it is important to keep everybody together and unified, because that is what puts the pressure on the corporations and entities that you are boycotting. It also includes sacrifice. There is no boycott that doesn't involve some level of inconvenience, some level of sacrifice, something that you are giving up in the idea of putting pressure on to make this happen. And part of organizing the protest is finding ways to mitigate that. And, one of the things I'll talk about later is if you're boycotting Target and Amazon and Walmart, where do you get your deodorant? There aren't mom and pop grocery stores that you can go to now. There's Quick Trip, there are convenience stores, there are large grocery stores, but having an alternative to what you're boycotting is also very important. Finally, there needs to be very clear, distinct, tangible, and a lot of times small goals. To have a boycott that says, I'm going to stop consuming, is not realistic. And trying to get people to join into that, they're not going to understand. Even something like, I'm going to boycott Christmas can be hard. What is very specific is, I'm going to boycott grapes. And I'm going to put pressure on the farmers so that they allow their workers to unionize and get better conditions. And it's very important that when you organize a boycott, you have all of those ideas and demands listed out ahead of time so people know why they're getting into it. So what does this mean? In essence, successful boycotts combine grassroots power with economic pain and strategic planning to achieve political and social change. Currently, the boycotts and most of the movement is very decentralized. And that can lead to some problems. In the past, things have been very disciplined and very organized, and it was churches and it was, um, you know, African American groups and very specific civilized groups that were planning all of these things and leading them. You know, not to put too fine a point on it, a lot of the current protests have more in common with internet fads than they do with the way traditional boycotts have been successful. It's mostly somebody picks something up online and says, hey, I'm not going to do that. And by boycotting, I'll make a difference. Whether it actually does or not, we'll get to later. But it's important to understand that a lot of boycotts have a long time horizon. A year, 2 years, even up to 5 years may be what it takes to get all of the organization in place, get the training of the activists in place, and then finally have a target and stage a boycott that's going to be successful. A lot of the ones that have been coming up recently that have been really quick and kind of appeared out of thin air may not be as effective as the ones that had the structure laid for days, weeks, months before they went into effect. Like I said, it's important to have clear demands and specific groups. 1 in 4 Americans say they've stopped purchasing something from a company due to politics or current events. But it turns out it's not easy to boycott. Of the 26% who have boycotted, 74% say they were successful in reducing or stopping and have stuck to it. So even 25% of the 25% of people who sign on to a boycott wind up dropping out. And that's not a critical mass to make a difference. I am going to put some links in the chat that I use to reference this information. So you can check them out at your leisure. So here are some boycotts that have worked. The 1955 Montgomery bus boycott, the 1965 Delano grape strike, the 1973 meat boycott, the 1988 tuna ban, boycott ban, and the 2023 Bud Light boycott. Now, not all of these were what I would consider on the right side of history, but they were effective in getting the corporations involved to change their behavior. I'll briefly go down the list and tell you what each one was. Um, the 1955 Montgomery boycott is probably one of the most famous boycotts in American history. It is where people in Montgomery, Alabama, and then across the South stopped using the bus system. At the time, the ridership was very heavily African American, and this boycott crippled the public transit system because so much of the revenue that they were getting from the buses, and at the time they were far less subsidized by the government and relied on those fares much more to stay in business, they were able to get the buses desegregated. But what we learn about it in history is, oh, Rosa Parks sat on a bus and then all of a sudden there was a boycott and the buses got desegregated. There was a lot that went into it. There was a lot of mutual aid that was necessary. Think of all of the people who are using a public transit system all of a sudden needing to find a way to get to work. They need carpools, they need bikes, they need, you know, rented buses, vans, whatever you can do to get the people to where they need to go. And a lot of times people simply walked, even if that was miles and miles and put hours onto their commute. That's what they had to do to maintain the boycott. The next boycott is the 1965 Delano grape strike. This was a strike that was led by Cesar Chavez, and it was striking to help the conditions of the farm workers, particularly in California. The first protest I ever went to was outside of D'Agostino's grocery store in New York City for this great boycott when I was all of 3 years old. So this is near and dear to my heart. But what happened was by boycotting the grapes that were so important to the farmers in California, um, they were able to pressure the farmers into improving the conditions for the farm workers. They are still not great, but they were able to establish the United Farm Workers Union, and they were also able to get better working conditions out of it. And it was because people stopped buying grapes. The next one is the 1973 meat boycott. That was in protest to the Vietnam War, really, because what happened is during the war, a lot of the young men left to go and fight, and a lot of the white suburban women who were left staying at home found the price of meat doubling and tripling. And for an entire week, they stopped buying meat, and it crippled the industry. They lost 50 to 60% of their revenues and quickly reversed their course and brought the prices down. Another one I remember very vividly because it happened while I was growing up was the 1974 Nestle boycott. Many of you may not have heard of this, and it ended in 1984 when there was a UN treaty that the company Nestle signed on for. Why would somebody boycott Nestle? Nestle owns Gerber, the baby food company. That's right. For any of you who have had a baby, you will find yourself being sent boxes and boxes and boxes of formula, whether you sign up for it, whether you ask for it, whether you want it, whether you plan on breastfeeding or not. Even if you tell your everybody in the world you're going to be breastfeeding, they send you all this free formula. In the developed world, there is enough education and people know how to make those decisions. And if they choose formula, a lot of times they have the financial needs to buy it. Where this particular issue became problematic is they were sending these formulas to Africa, to Southeast Asia, to some of the poorest areas in the world. And they would get this free formula and think, oh, this is modern science. It's from America. This must be better than breast milk. And they would start feeding the formula to their babies. The women's milk would dry up and the babies would starve to death. So that was the point of this boycott. And when Nestle signed on to the UN charter about it, the boycott ended. And it was generally successful because they had to comply with the international rules and norms about it. In 1988, there was a big tuna boycott. For those of you who don't remember, what happened was dolphins were getting caught in the tuna nets. And as a result, the dolphins were being killed as a bycatch of the tuna. People like dolphins, they're cute marine mammals and they were endangered. So they had this boycott where people stopped buying canned tuna. I want to say it was Bumblebee, but I'm not exactly sure which brand was boycotted. But eventually it led to dolphin safe nets and equipment to prevent these dolphins from being caught in with the tuna. Finally, I didn't agree with this protest, but it was successful, so that's why it's on the list. In 2023, Bud Light had a trans spokesperson for their beer. And it was the first time in history that somebody had done a commercial for a major beer product like that with somebody who was trans. And the backlash was so bad that Bud Light fairly quickly pulled that campaign back and has been doing damage control ever since. And to be completely honest, they lost an enormous amount of market share over it that has not completely come back yet. So the next thing I'm going to do is talk about some of the current boycotts that are going on. We've covered kind of the historical stuff a little bit. Let's talk about what's going on today. This is a small list. There's a lot of other stuff that is out there because these things are springing up, like I said, internet memes. So everybody says, I'm going to go and boycott something. Amazon is being boycotted currently for a variety of reasons. Specifically, they funded and Jeff Bezos had a seat of honor at Donald Trump's inauguration. They gave an enormous amount of money for that. But in addition to that, when Donald Trump made his DEI pronouncements, they were one of the companies that killed their DEI program. I think I'm just going to do this as we go along. So for me, the Amazon boycott is an example of something that doesn't work very well. There are a couple of reasons for it. There's no organizing organization. There's no one group that is coordinating a boycott of Amazon. It's decentralized and diffuse, and it's also hard to keep track of who's doing what. But more importantly, Amazon has diversified their business model so that something like 30 to 40% of their revenue comes from Amazon Web Services, where they're doing business to business contracting. So even if their retail division went away and disappeared in the boycott, they would still be able to make money and stay in business. Further, a lot of times if you try to find something on Amazon and say, oh, I'm going to go to a local company that has that, or the manufacturing company, particularly if they are small, Amazon has developed a logistics system that these companies can buy into to send their goods around the country and around the world, and you may be giving them money and not even know it. Target is another example of a very prominent boycott. And that has specifically been because for many, many years, Target was a leader in DEI and they embraced it and had all of their employees involved in their DEI program. And Donald Trump pulled that back. And since then, there has been a boycott of Target. How I feel about this is I fully support DEI. I think companies should be compelled to have DEI programs. However, this has been, to me, less successful because there hasn't been as coordinated um, engagement with it. And Target really hasn't changed their behavior at all, despite the fact that this has been going on over a year now. In addition to that, I'll get to Walmart next, but if you're trying to boycott Amazon and Target and Walmart, that's going to be really inconvenient for people. Like that's going to be a large ask and nearly impossible for people to get what are considered basic supplies. And there needs to be a better solution to that before any of these boycotts are going to be effective. Walmart is a particular boycott that is important to me. Walmart has traditionally been one of the most horrible companies in our country and has gotten huge. Now, the positive things are they build a lot of times in rural communities where there are no other stores. The bad side of that is the local family owned general stores ultimately go out of business because they're undercut by Walmart. The other thing that Walmart has done is they've actually donated to some of the No Kings protests. One of the heirs has donated a large amount of money to make it happen. But to me, that doesn't nullify the things that Walmart is doing. The first thing Walmart does is they are very anti-union. They will shut down a profitable store because there is even talk of a union, and they won't even think twice about it. But more importantly, when it comes to labor relations, they deliberately hire part-time people and keep them part-time so that they don't have to pay their benefits, and then teach them how to get public assistance. So they're not paying their employees a living wage. They're not giving them full-time work. They're not giving them benefits. And they're expecting the American taxpayers to pay for their health insurance and their food. But it gets worse. If you are a supplier to Walmart, because so much of what their stuff comes from is from China, they expect all of their suppliers to drop their prices by 2% per year. Now think about it. If your business model relies on making a profit and you have to drop your prices by 2% a year, and inflation is going up 2% a year or 3% or 4%, how are you ever going to make money? And what that does is it squeezes margins so Walmart can offer products at a lower price at the expense of their suppliers. And it just goes on and on and on. If you want to boycott one of these companies, I would strongly suggest Walmart. But again, that's just my personal pet peeve, and we can discuss it a little more later. People have been boycotting Home Depot. Again, there's very little evidence that this has hit their bottom line or that it has had a major impact on their business operations. They are boycotting Home Depot because, whether you know or not, there are many undocumented people and people who stand in Walmart or Home Depot parking lots waiting for people to pick them up to work day jobs doing projects for these people. And Home Depot has allowed ICE to come not only into their parking lots to round these people up, whether they are undocumented or not, but come into their buildings. One of the most creative boycotts was to go in and buy a 17-cent ice scraper because you want to scrape ice out of there. and then turn around and go to the customer service desk and return it and get your money back. And if one person does it, they might say that person's crazy. But to quote Arlo Guthrie, if 50,000 people a day come in and buy an ice scraper and get in line and go to the customer service desk and return it, Home Depot makes no money. It's a huge hassle for them, and their paying customers can't get through the line to buy their products. That is something that I would see as more successful, but because there isn't a larger organization and movement behind it, it has already kind of fizzled out very quickly. One of the most successful boycotts that I've seen recently was Jimmy Kimmel and Disney, because almost everybody has a Disney streaming service and was paying for it until they unceremoniously fired Jimmy Kimmel strictly based on what Donald Trump said. Really, it wasn't, I mean, they made up an excuse, but that was really what was behind it. And then everybody started canceling their service. This was more effective because, unlike Amazon, Disney doesn't have a whole lot of other business besides their media that they can lean on. Now they have their amusement parks and they have other streaming entities, but their perception as a media company encompasses all of it. So if people are canceling their Disney Plus, they're not going to go to the amusement parks, they're not going to buy the merchandise, and Disney very quickly saw how fast people were leaving, and that was the important part. This needs to be done at a scale that even a company like Disney can't afford to lose that many customers. Uh, Tesla takedowns. Obviously, Elon Musk got involved with Doge and Donald Trump, and to this day, people are having Tesla takedowns. Have the takedowns made a difference to Tesla's bottom line and their shareholders? I don't know. But I do know that Tesla's brand is not what it was a year ago. A year ago, they were the forefront of electric vehicle technology. And now people who have them have stickers on it say, I got this before Musk went crazy. So it has certainly harmed their brand and their reputation, and that has translated into lower sales. Here in Colorado, one of the things that people are doing is protesting and boycotting Key Lime Airways. What is Key Lime Airways? It's a small regional carrier that is barely keeping itself afloat, but what they've done is they've contracted with ICE, and they have been ferrying detainees from Denver and Colorado around the country to detention centers. So our no concentration camps in Colorado and our immigrant partner team have joined up to boycott Key Lime Air. And just recently, the Denver City Council decided not to expand the number of gate access to Key Lime at DIA. And finally, there are various boycotts related to Israel and Palestine, and that's not something I want to get into today, but it is important to know that is there. But like the other ones that I've talked about, there isn't a whole lot of evidence to show that they're getting connected. Um, Terry, I will try and get a link and put it in the chat. I can't do it right at the moment, but I will. Um, so the next thing I'm going to do is compare historical boycotts to current boycotts. So historically, boycotts are often part of long-term, highly organized social movements that rely on widespread, sustained participation and a direct impact on specific, often local targets. Once you start getting into large multinational corporations, it's really hard to have an effect on a local scale. It really needs to be national or international before you get a critical mass to make a difference. It needs to have a significant impact, economic impact. The target business were often more dependent on the specific boycotting community. This is, think of the lunch counters, right? Where, if somebody sits at a lunch counter and buys a cup of coffee so they can't be forcibly removed for trespassing, but sits there through the entire breakfast, lunch, and lunch rush, that lunch counter is going to lose a lot of business and a lot of money and is going to struggle to stay alive. Go ahead, Julie. You're muted. Sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you ask your question again?
I did. I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all.
Okay. The next thing you need are coalitions and organization. Success often required immense organizational effort. And it's not something that just magically appears out of thin air. It takes activists working and planning and organizing so that things like, the United Farm Workers Union can be created to then support a strike and support a boycott. So, all kinds of groups. It doesn't need to be a labor union, or it doesn't need to be a church, or it doesn't need to be a social organization that does it. It just needs to be a community of people organizing the larger boycott to bring as many people in as they can. And then one of the other problems is the lack of alternatives. In many cases, and this has gotten worse as we've gotten into the digital age, consumers have fewer alternatives for products and services, which makes the collective refusal to purchase something from a specific entity more potent and noticeable at the local level. It's easier to protest the bakery that won't make a cake for a gay couple. It's easier to protest a flower shop that won't provide flowers for gay and transgender people. But once you start trying to boycott FTD and 1-800-Flowers, it's a whole different ballgame. And the tactics that you need to do on that scale require a large national movement, which requires a large national infrastructure, and then bringing communities from all over the country together.
Some flowers for Christmas.
So current boycotts, how are they working? Or what ways can they work in? A lot more of these boycotts will be effective working on reputation and media attention. Honestly, if companies start getting bad reviews, bad press, bad publicity, bad online reputations, they will be more likely to change their behavior now than they would have in the past when those things didn't exist and nobody cared about how many stars they got on Amazon or on YouTube. But when the comments and the ratings start to go down, particularly on something like Amazon, their products aren't going to be bought. It's going to be more effective convincing people not to buy something from Amazon by giving it a 1-star review than it will be by trying to organize a boycott. Frequently in the digital age, boycotts are organized quickly via social media. And, the aim is to generate negative press and damage a company's brand and image rather than inflict the deep, lasting financial harm on the corporations because many of these companies are near monopolies. There simply aren't many alternatives or other places that you can take your money to on a large enough scale that it will matter. Um, so I would recommend that if we're going to boycott, we focus on the brand's reputation more than financial boycotts. That doesn't mean you should, go out and turn your Amazon back on and start getting everything. But if the goal is to change their behavior, it will be much better done by the perception of there being a bad company on the internet and on TikTok than it will be trying to withhold your dollars because they're monopolies and it's going to take a lot of people boycotting a lot of money. And even then, if their shareholders are still happy with what they're doing and the stock price is going up, they're not going to care, even if their revenue goes down by a noticeable amount. So most of this is social driven media. Unfortunately, that means that things can peter out very quickly. It can be here today and gone tomorrow. I mean, there's not even a 24-hour news cycle now. So to have the sustaining discipline to organize these boycotts isn't really there yet for many of the companies that we're boycotting now. So that's why they talk about things like boycotts and counter movements, where um, you buy from companies that you support instead of trying to boycott a company you're opposed to. And again, that can work in the same way because you're taking revenue from one company, giving it to another one, but also raising their visibility and their reputation by highlighting that this is a good company to buy from. To sustain pressure, you need to have a lot of people involved. And sustaining that pressure, as we've seen in the movement and sustaining the protests, can be hard to do. And making sure that, if you're going to boycott Amazon, that people don't backslide and start going back to Amazon because it's so convenient. And this is where people need to understand they need to go outside their comfort zone. Boycotts are not easy, and they almost by definition require some form of pain or inconvenience to be successful on the participants as well as the companies. And you need to be prepared to switch to Spotify for your Amazon Music and find local stores and do more work on the internet to buy something online than just going to Amazon if you're going to boycott it. As an organizer, to me, it would be important to have alternatives already in place. If you're going to boycott Amazon, go to Tom's of Maine, go to Burt's Bees, go to directly to their websites to get all of the things you would get from Amazon. This gets a little more complicated when you start to think of, all right, if I'm going to get paper plates for my party next week, well, do I leave Amazon and go to Procter and Gamble's website to buy it? First of all, they may not ship it directly to you, but really, when you're talking about a company that large, I don't know that that's going to make a lot of difference. In essence, while the past boycotts often achieved change through direct sustained economic deprivation, today's boycotts are more a form of communication and brand signaling than leveraging media coverage to pressure companies. So the approach has to change based on the digital world. We can't do what we've been doing before. And that applies across a lot of areas, well beyond just boycotts. I didn't talk about Spotify earlier, and I'm going to talk about it now because I brought it up in reference to Amazon. I did boycott Amazon. And particularly my wife loves her music list. And because we were Prime members, we got Amazon Music for free, which is a great streaming service to have. But if you're going to divest from Amazon, you need a new streaming service. So we went to Spotify. Are you starting to see where this becomes a problem? When the alternative is being boycotted as well, that makes it even harder. And when it comes to the Spotify boycott, um, I've heard a lot of mixed messages about it. The reason people were boycotting Spotify is they were running ads recruiting people for ICE. I don't know if you've turned your TV on recently or YouTube on recently. It's full of ads recruiting people for ICE and offering $50,000 sign-on bonuses. Do I think it's a good use of time and money to single Spotify out as the one company that's advertising to recruit ICE agents? If everybody else is advertising to recruit ICE agents, I don't know how you're going to be able to sustain that and how you're going to be able to organize that. And more importantly, it's kind of come out that their advertising is a third party. And it's not even directly Spotify that is putting those ads on. They're leaving spots for commercials in between their songs. And it's an advertising company that is accepting the money from the government to put the ICE ads up. In exactly the same way that it would be at your local TV station or your local radio station. You know, if you're listening to iHeartRadio, it's going to be the same way, and those ads are going to be there. And I just don't know that that's a good use of boycott time and energy. And there is also things like Truth Social, right? Obviously, we are all not on Donald Trump's platform. However, if you want to talk about what could be a very effective way to boycott, they have sold stock. And if we get on and manipulate their algorithm to start putting on our messaging, they will lose money. And it will drive their subscribers off that platform if they're seeing messages that they don't want to hear. And that goes along with boycotts in other parts of social media. If you think about YouTube or TikTok, you know, where they say like, subscribe, and comment, right? If you leave negative comments and negative reviews and don't like them, that's a form of boycott because that is having an economic effect on the algorithm that's going to send more people to them so they get more advertising money, and that is their business model. So these are things that we can do, but we should we should organize them in a way that they can be sustainable for days, weeks, months, and years. And do that, you know, I'm not always the greatest planner, but this is something that should be planned ahead of time. And some of these decisions should be made, like we're going to go after Joe Rogan and we are going to go on his podcast and comment what we really think of him and dislike it and give him a 1-star review. But it needs to be that granular and that specific to be more likely to be effective. And finally, I I have a few other things kind of strategy wise that we can talk about. But another more effective economic boycott is what happened with the meme stocks a few years ago, like GameStop, where retail investors would take small amounts of money and buy a stock, and a stock that at the time was distressed. So GameStop, being a brick and mortar video game store, was on the verge of going out of business. So there were a lot of people who were shorting the stock in the investor world, expecting it to go down. And retail investors started buying the stock up in small amounts, 10 shares at a time, one share at a time, $100 at a time. And what that did is it made the price start going up. When you're shorting a stock and the price goes up, you're actually losing money. And what that did was make all of the automated sell or buy responses to close the short positions out, buy shares to close their short positions, which made the stock price go up even higher. A lot of these are what are called pump and dump type of schemes. The GameStop one was different. The way they did it was legal, but this is another effective way that's not boycott adjacent, because if you can cause a company's stock price to go down by buying a few shares at a time and a few shares at a time and multiply that by millions of people, then the investors will start to notice. Then the CEOs will start to notice. And then the boards of directors will start to notice. And then companies will change their behavior. So with that, that is the end of my presentation. And that has gone on far longer than I expected. Are there any questions? Lindy, do you have the questions from the chat, or do you want to give me a couple of minutes to go through and find them?
I did mark them with the eyeballs for you.
Right. Okay.
I'm going up myself too. The first one was from Patty. She said, "Did you say there are training courses on how to remain calm while being provoked?"
Okay. During the 1960s, when they were doing the lunch counter boycotts, some of the African American groups specifically organized trainings. The closest thing we have to that now is actually our Saturday morning civil rights resistance education group. But to my knowledge, nobody has started reorganizing those kinds of trainings. And I think if we're going to have effective boycotts and civil disobedience, we are going to need to have more of those trainings along the lines. I would also make the argument that a lot of what we have, specifically Solidarity Warriors, have done and other people have done in the last year has been movement building, in introducing people to this space of resistance. When the movement gets to a point that civil resistance and civil disobedience is going to be something that we do, those trainings would need to happen before we get to that point. So, to my knowledge, there isn't somebody that is actually organizing those things on a more than academic level. Let me put it that way. And it looked very different in this world, right? Because I wouldn't train somebody to sit at a lunch counter and take abuse and have people yell racial slurs at them and spit on them and beat them and drag them out of restaurants, because that's not the world that we're in now. So whatever training there needs to be done would need to reflect where we are now and what needs to happen here. And I see things more like sit-ins and takeovers as being more likely, and things like national monuments, things like potentially business headquarters, maybe something with the detention facilities, state capitals, things like that, where the type of training that would need to be done for that would be slightly different. Even, one of the popular things since the Black Lives Matter movement, is going on highways and shutting them down. And even that requires some very specific training to be successful, because you can't just walk onto a highway where cars are going 75 miles an hour and the police are going to arrest you and have it be successful without training. But the short answer is I am not aware of a training like that that is currently going on. They have gone in the past. But I would reach out through the Activism Alliance Slack to the people who are doing the Saturday morning training to ask more questions and find out more about that.
Okay, and I think you covered this one. Do we have any stats on the recent Amazon boycott?
I don't, but I know it does. I know it has not changed Jeff Bezos or Amazon's behavior at all. And like I said, I think they are insulated enough from their retail business. Certainly, they make millions and billions of dollars at it, but their logistics, their back end Amazon Web Services and computer services now, and data centers are sufficient that they could ignore a retail boycott for a long time, and it is not well organized enough to me to be effective on the scale that it needs to be. Amazon is a global company, not just a national company. You would need, people boycotting Amazon to the point that the business almost dried up before they would even notice. But give me a second. I don't have any, yeah, I don't have any specific numbers, but there are slight increases to their sales up to potentially 6%. So if their sales are rising, that means the boycott is not being effective.
Ken asks, has anyone put together a list of local or progressive alternatives to Amazon, etc.?
Not that I'm aware of. Most of the time, you are on your own to find local companies and local stores that will have the products that you're looking for. And a lot of times, you'll need an alternative equivalent product as opposed to what you're seeing absolutely on Amazon, because they are Amazon, like Walmart, gets things very cheap from China, and getting exactly the same product would cost you significantly more money if it was made in America at a local shop. So a lot of times you're looking at alternatives. I won't get into whether the quality is better or not, but most of what I have been doing to avoid Amazon is looking for a product, and I'll go to Amazon and look at their products and then go directly to the manufacturer's website. And a lot of them are local users because Amazon has been courting these local companies for their logistics business for some time now. And it's almost like they are eBay when they brought their Buy It Now in and tried to get mom and pop people on their platform, even though they're not actually warehousing any of the products anymore. And I would recommend it. And again, it's hard to find a list of local companies across the country as replacements. But if you go to Amazon, I mean, I got a new dog recently, and I had bought some stuffed toys years ago that were nearly indestructible, and I wanted to get some more for him. So I went back and looked in my Amazon orders, and then went directly to the company's website to buy them, and they should be here any day now. Those are the types of things that we need to do. Also one of the advantages of the digital age is you don't necessarily need someone to make a list of local companies for you. And in fact, you'll know the local companies better than anybody else will because they're in your community. They are your local, somebody in your local organizing groups will have a much better idea about who the local people are who are, selling whatever it is you're buying at Amazon, whether it's electronics or paper products or personal hygiene stuff. The and in fact maybe something like the local indivisible groups would be better to do that. But you can be anywhere in the world now and find a small business owner to buy from. And it doesn't necessarily need to be local in your city to be not Amazon.
Right. Which is better, Home Depot or Lowe's?
Lowe's hasn't gotten the publicity of letting ice in the way Home Depot has. I also know that for many years, environmental groups have been boycotting Home Depot because they use rainforest hardwoods in the handles for their paintbrushes. I have no evidence or reason to believe that Lowe's is not doing both of those things. But I also have no evidence to prove that they are. Because Home Depot is being targeted and they have a well-known right-wing corporate ownership, they are the bigger target. And I would say that therefore Lowe's would be better than Home Depot.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the nearest Lowe's to me is 3 times as far away, but that hasn't stopped me from not going to Lowe's.
And on a personal note, I would say look up Ace Hardwares. A lot of those are locally owned and they're
Mm-hmm.
in almost every city.
Yep. I love Ace Hardware. I've been there a bunch of times. They are much smaller. They aren't going to have everything that you could possibly need all at once. You may need to make a couple of trips. You may need to call ahead to see if they've got what you want. Um, but if you've ever been to a Home Depot or a Lowe's and never been able to find somebody who could help you, and then you found somebody, who knows plumbing but doesn't know anything about woodworking to help you, the service at Ace Hardware is much, much better. It's still a franchise, it's still a large corporation, but relative to Home Depot and Lowe's, they are small local hardware company equivalents.
Yeah, and they're
Um,
mostly locally owned by those people that own the
and
store. They're not a
right.
lot. They're part of a large corporation, but not an actual like Home Depot.
Well,
Not
and
Fred.
the reality is that a mom and pop hardware store, just like a mom and pop grocery store that isn't part of some sort of chain in some way, doesn't
Right.
exist anymore because the scale of pricing is such that you need to belong to one of these larger companies to get product at prices that people are willing to pay. If you're ordering 5 shovels at a time from a company that's sending 100,000 or 1 million to Home Depot, you are going to get the worst products that they have at the highest prices and never be able to compete, which is why these places don't exist anymore. And I would say that Ace Hardware may be as close as you're going to be able to get to a local hardware store.
Yeah. Uh, don't many public libraries have sites where you can access music free and a good thing to support?
I've heard some conflicting things about that.
I think it depends on the city you're in because I
And
know
it depends
here
on the
they did away
library
with the
system as
music
well.
completely.
Yeah. A lot of libraries do have free electronic ebooks. They have free video games that you can check out, sometimes online, sometimes as cassette cartridges or CDs. Um, but there are generally costs associated with those services. So it costs the libraries money to provide those things for free. So people said maybe you shouldn't do that. I tend to think if we should be supporting the libraries in that, and they may have some free streaming services as well that I am not aware of. It would not surprise me if they've got free TV shows, free movies, and free virtual books that they would have music as well. I'm not particularly familiar with it. One of the other things is, people have talked a lot about Amazon Music and Spotify, but Pandora still exists. There is an alternative to them if you want to move all of your music lists over again.
Yeah.
It can be done, but you would, and that, like Spotify, has a free version as well as a paid version.
Yeah,
And
and Tidal too. I know a
mm,
lot of people have moved from Spotify over to Tidal and they were able to move everything over. It's kind of a little pain in the butt, but they were able to do it. So there's that too. I
eh,
think we're pretty much caught up. A lot of it was commenting on the grapes, of course. All of us remember those.
yeah,
I do, definitely. I think it wasn't it Chicken of the Sea that was the one that was being boycotted?
let me check. It may have been Chicken of the Sea.
I, this was during my parents' divorce, so it was in my mom's house, not my dad's.
It it looks like it was Starkist
Oh, Starkist.
that
Okay.
was specifically boycotted, but the boycott also included any tuna that didn't have dolphin safe labeled on it.
Right, right.
So, and that, could have been any of the other tunas as well.
Okay.
Since we are such a small group, and that is kind of the end of the boycott presentation, uh, I would like to open it up to anybody who has any thoughts, any topics, any questions, anything you want to ask me about Solidarity Warriors, what we're doing, anything that's happening in your area where you are. Um, how do I sign up for the civil rights call? Let me get that for you.
I think it's ended. I don't think they put up the new link yet.
Okay, they are on break. I do know that.
Yeah, I went to the link I've gotten. It's down. It says
Oh,
event ended.
okay.
So I think she needs to set up the new one.
Okay, in that case, what I would suggest you do, and let me pull the link back up again, um, is go to our Slack channel for Activism Alliance because they have a channel for that group and you can sign into it and introduce yourself. So when they do start up their third semester, you can be involved for that.
Sorry, which channel did you say to look on the Slack?
It is called.
It's called Activism Alliance, and then the channel is Group Civil Resistance Education.
You know what? I can put it directly in, and yes, it is called Civil Resistance Education. And like I said, the people that run that group um, will be happy to help you even outside of session if you have questions or need information. I know a lot of what they do comes from the Library of Congress, so a lot of it is free, and a lot of it is specific programs for organizing nonviolence and what's been done not only in the 60s, but they talk about the Yugoslavia revolution and many of the other nonviolent movements through history above and beyond the 1960s. And it's really a great resource for that kind of stuff. That channel is to organize the Saturday morning meetings. So they have a Saturday morning Zoom that has a curriculum, that has readings, that has articles where they go and they talk about these nonviolent resistance topics. So really what you want to do is get into that Saturday morning session instead of just the Slack. The Slack is just where they coordinate what they're doing and where you need to go to find the reference materials. But it's the Saturday morning classes where the actual training takes place.
Yeah, and I do see that she's put a new link as pending, so
Okay. All right. If that is it, and there are no more questions, comments, or topics burning a hole in your brain, go and enjoy your holidays, please. And go ahead, Diana.
Okay. I just had a comment. I'll try to keep it short. So
Sure.
I live in a small rural area in a town in Missouri, southeast Missouri. And
Okay.
before, I believe it was before Hands Off, we started literally just a handful of us meeting at the senior center and discussing what in the heck was going on, in the country. And that has continued to grow. We go to, I mean, we have our rallies here. Sometimes some of us will go to Springfield to the bigger rallies, but we make sure that we always have rallies right here in our town of 3,000. And it has made a difference. Number one, the group is growing. Number two, we used to see Trump signs all over the place, people with flags outside their house, people with Confederate flags in their trucks. And most of that is gone ever since we have started making ourselves, our putting ourselves out there, so people could see us because, this is a very red state and people with progressive, liberal, democratic values were just scared to do anything, say anything, cross anybody. But my point is just little by little by little, we're having an effect in this town. And we just had our first ICE pickup here this week.
Oh, wow.
Yes, they chased the cars down Highway 5, which is a major, and of course, we're out in the country, right? So
Yep.
you don't drive like an idiot because you're going to hit a deer or, you're going to go off the road. So
Yep.
the van did crash, and I don't know how many people they picked up. Apparently some people were injured. We don't know where they went. We also heard that the mayor, this is our new mayor, was bragging about it. So immediately we started, emailing, texting each other. We have an email group and a chat group, letting everybody know, what's going on. And I guarantee you that this will be next. We don't want ICE here. We want that mayor out. We're going to do everything we can. And I think this is what's so important, is to start right where you are at the local level and, and kind of work up from there. So we're having success, and every time we do have some success, more people want to get involved and more things happen, and it's working.
So that is very close to my own heart. I spent 30 years in Missouri's second congressional district being represented by Ann Wagner, and that's where I learned a lot of what I know about doing this. And you're exactly right. Last week, I have an entire presentation on how to make a difference in a red state versus a blue state. Um, and I was
Wow.
doing the red state part of it, but you've got it exactly right. To drag up some terminology from the past, that
Mm-hmm.
is political correctness, where the social pressure to not hang a Trump flag or a Confederate flag outside your house is enough to change people's behavior so that because they don't feel comfortable being the person waving their racist flag because of the political pressure.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, I happen to know Missouri pretty well. A lot of the people support very progressive ideas, but as soon as you put a D next to it, all of a sudden it's a no. And
Right.
if you can present the issues in a way that isn't branded as democratic, a lot of people will support it. And you can get people to sign on to these ideas, especially in this current administration, where they're doing a lot of things that aren't popular for people in red states, like, cutting the VA and cutting the Medicaid subsidies
Mm-hmm.
and the healthcare subsidies. Um, you can get people to join your group and become involved and
Mm-hmm.
still think they're a Republican. And that is how you start to change people's hearts and minds. And I've said this a million times. A lot of the people supporting this regime are MAGA first, Republican second, and American third.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can break that identity a little bit so that they can consider ideas outside of what Rush Limbaugh and Joe Rogan are saying, then you have a chance to make progress. And one of the things that I learned is it doesn't matter how bright ruby red your area is, there are like-minded Democrats and progressives there. They're just
Yeah.
in hiding. And
Yeah.
you give them a place to come to, they will be very happy to come out and find a community.
Yeah. We've had people stop as we rally at the corner of two well, they're just two major roads. So that's where we rally. And it's on private property and we're allowed to do it. So nobody can stop us from doing it. And it happens to be catty cornered from the Walmart. So we've had people just stop and we have a lot of people honking and thumbs up but actually we've had people stop and get out of their cars and come over and tell us, thank you for doing this, offer us money, how do I get involved? It's pretty incredible. And we don't advertise ourselves as Democrats. We advertise ourselves as uh, really as progressives. Although with this business with the mayor, I think we're
Mhm.
going to have to get a little bit political because things really need. I came from Texas too, which I've seen it go from Democrat to what it is now, and at some point I think we have to do that. And
Mhm.
regarding trying to find places to shop, being in a small town, and you probably know this, but there are a lot of locally owned little businesses, and there's a very strong push here to shop there. We also have everybody, all the nonprofits, all the churches, everybody working toward food insecurity because I'm in Douglas County, which I think is
Mhm.
county. And so everybody is on board with that. There's so much community involvement. Um, but because of that, because everybody's opening a thrift shop, you can buy anything. You can buy whatever you need. And I've been doing this for years. I would much rather buy something recycled, my furniture, my clothing, my whatever. Um,
Mhm.
it's cheaper. It's usually better, and I believe in recycling. So all of that is possible. The Walmart here, your point about Walmart in small towns was a really good one. It's unfortunate that there are some things that we have to buy at Walmart, but it's a pretty good Walmart, but it's limited in what they offer, and it's very, very expensive. The prices have gone up astronomically, and it's because they can.
Mhm.
I moved from the Dallas Metroplex, and depending on where you were in the Metroplex, if you were in a predominantly Mexican American part of the town, the Walmart carried different products and they were cheaper. If you went up to the far north Dallas wealthy neighborhood, it was a super center, and the prices were higher. I actually went to a bunch of different Walmarts and compared,
Yep.
apples. And so they just, they're going to charge whatever the market will bear. And it's kind of killing us here
And
because
Diana, I want to get to Deborah's question. She's been very patient. But when it comes to Walmart, I am not insensitive to the rural communities that only have a Walmart and nothing else.
Mhm.
But, I've been watching an Alaska Railroad show where there are people who live in the bush and the train comes once a month and
Mhm.
they have to get on the train and get all of their supplies and come back with them. And this is where boycotts can be uncomfortable and
Yeah.
difficult and require some more work so that maybe you have to drive up to St. Louis once a month to get your stuff to be successful. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you need to do that. And it doesn't mean that everybody in your rural community is actually going to go to that trouble to make it successful. But that's a good example of, where this can be difficult and where people need to understand the sacrifice to make it happen. Um, that's just one example.
Well,
Um,
like I said, we do have alternatives here, and also I talk to people at Walmart every time I go there, and everybody's upset over the prices. And I think one of the things that we're kind of missing is just buy less. I
mhm.
don't buy anything I don't absolutely have to have from Walmart.
A rural community is a great place to look for used stuff on Facebook Marketplace. It's a
Yeah.
great place to get involved in a buy nothing group where things are traded for free if you don't need them, and
Hmm.
other places. And yeah, simply just buying less is good for the environment and bad for the companies. Terry, you had asked for a link. Can you ask that question? I will go and look for it. Deborah, thank you for being so patient. Go ahead, please.
Well, I found it riveting because I live in Dallas, Texas, and I am from St. Louis, Missouri. So I think I have a lot of context to what was being said. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed your discussion tonight about all the different ways that one can boycott. You can boycott out or boycott in. And so that sounds like we not only need a naughty list, but we also need a nice list. Um, but you also discussed, that companies have good parts and bad parts. And no company is really perfect. I mean, a company will have issues, but isn't the goal right now democracy and to secure that first? And then we can work on the other issues that these companies have. I mean, our founding fathers were slave owners, but they did a lot of good. They were not perfect. And I think these companies maybe are not perfect either. I've
Right.
not, maybe but I have not heard of a company yet that just stands up and says, um, we are not for Trump. We are sticking by our DEI. We are sticking by this, sticking by that. I've not heard a company stand up and actually say that yet.
Mhm.
They would definitely be on the nice list if we heard that.
Yep.
But we kind of have to maybe decide what the overall goal is right now. Yes, Walmart has issues, you know, and other companies have issues too, but we need to connect with the ones that are really putting their eye on democracy right now. I don't know. What do you think about that,
I,
Morgan?
I think that's a great question, and let me take a stab at parts of it. First of all, I agree that there is no company that is without sin, right? There is
Right.
no company that is truly good, because at the end of the day, they are all profit motivated, and money is more important than just about anything else. And they will compromise every part of their soul to make more money, and some more than others, to be fair. Um, Specifically to answer your question, the places that I have seen companies stand up, first one that comes to mind is Ben and Jerry's, where they got into a knockdown, drag out fight with a company that they sold Ben and Jerry's to about not being able to do their uh, progressive work the way that they wanted to. The smaller, more, how do I describe this without, um, like I said, companies like Tom's of Maine, Burt's Bees, REI are very different in how they approach things than the larger corporations, the Dick's Sporting Goods, the Walmarts, and all of them. Most importantly, I agree with you that right now we need to fight for our country and our democracy. And to me, that means removing the people in power who are committing crimes and treason. To do that, and this is part of things that we've done before, doesn't there's no one way to do that. And we need to do all of the above. But what I'm specifically going to talk about are what's called pillars of support. What are the things that are keeping Donald Trump in power right now? First and foremost, it's the military and the threat of violence. The police, the National Guard, they are why he can stay in power. That's going to be hard to change, but it is changing. I've seen quite a bit of anecdotal evidence that the military isn't really happy with him because he's expecting them to violate their oath to the Constitution. And he is not very popular there. And if that pillar falls, he will be weaker. The same goes for things like the religious community. He got elected by appealing to evangelical white Christians. If they start to lose support for him because of the Epstein files, for example, he will be less popular, he will be weaker, and he will be easier to remove from power. Even within the Republican Party, which is another legal and legislative pillar of support, he is losing prominence, right? Because they have now voted several times to release the Epstein files and other things that he didn't want them to do that they were afraid to do before. And one of the things we need to get to is get the Republicans to the point that they would support an impeachment. Which brings me to the corporations. Business and corporations are one of the biggest pillars of support that are holding him up. They are buying and selling representatives and senators, and they are paying for the things that he is doing directly. It's not that they're paying extra money into taxes to the government. They are directly paying to build his ballroom, and they are directly paying for some of these flights. They are directly profiting from the detention centers as private corporations. And to the extent that we can make it toxic for these companies to be supporting the administration, that is as important to remove them from power as anything else. And all of it comes down to how do we erode the support that are keeping people in power? And money is one of the huge things that are keeping these politicians in power. And if the corporations that are funding them see that it costs them more to kill their DEI program than benefit they get from good favor of the government, that will benefit what we're trying to do.
We need a nice list.
We do need a nice list, but first we need nice corporations to put on that list, and that's the
Right.
hard part. But
Well,
the other thing
they could be on the nice list because of blank and on the naughty list because of blank.
I think a comparison
You
list,
see what I mean?
yeah, I think
You're on the
a,
nice list because of this, but you're also on the naughty list because of that. So it's not, they can be on both lists simultaneously.
I kind of look at it as a less bad list. It
Oh,
is less bad that Target has ended their DEI program than Amazon is paying for the inauguration. It is less bad that Lowe's um, isn't saying anything, whereas Home Depot is actively allowing ICE in. Like, I have a hard time having a nice list. I see it more as a less bad list. Again, there are really very few stores I feel good going into on a moral level. Um, but um, it would be important for somebody to do that, and I can bring that to the mass blackout people who have been running that and see if somebody can put that together.
one of the things that I thought would be really funny because you had talked about the Home Depot where everyone bought an ice scraper and then immediately returned it for 17 cents. I think it would have been hilariously funny if everyone had sent Donald Trump a piece of coal for Christmas.
That's
I
exactly the
thought
thing I love.
that would have been,
Yeah,
I think, so hysterical.
yep. I think it would be even better if somebody sent a dump truck full of coal and dumped it in front of the White House. But that, that's just my thinking big on your idea.
But
Um,
if 8 million people sent a piece of coal to put it in a Ziploc bag, slapped an address sticker on it, and sent it to the White House, I mean, that you can visually see 8 million pieces of coal,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, and
So,
I love the idea of just putting a stamp and an address label on a piece of coal too. Not even wrapping it, not putting it in a box, just sending it through the mail. But also to your nice list question,
mhm,
a lot
right.
of the things we need to think just a little outside what you would normally think of. One of the
Hmm.
places where I see a lot of uh, institutions standing up, and again, this is another pillar of support, are the universities, the Harvards and the other universities that are having their research funding cut and essentially their teaching hospitals shut down because of the Doge cuts are the same ones that are standing up and saying, all right, go ahead and cut tens of millions of dollars from us. We're not going to do what you want. And that is the type of corporate standing up that I think you're talking about. And that's one of the places, as an example, that I am seeing it.
I actually called my university. I graduated from Missouri State University, and I'm friends with someone who's very high up in the university, and basically, I was told that they are just trying not to be visible at this point. They're not making any statements, but they're just hoping that Trump doesn't have their eyes on them. And that's the way they're approaching it.
Okay. Terry, I am getting your information. Um, the two things I have so far are join the no concentration camps in Colorado or the immigrant partnership team in Colorado. They are the local groups that are organizing it here. And a lot of where they're getting out the information about what they're doing is in the subreddit r/Denver protests. I don't know that Terry is still here.
They're also on Instagram too, both of those groups. I put the flyer in there for. And I love Citizens Ben's little flyer there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Speaking of which, we have a flyer too, and this is the last thing I will put up before we finish. Um, I told you a little bit about our upcoming event on January 6th,
Oh, the one I put up earlier?
the one you put up earlier. We do have a flyer for it. Let me see.
Yeah,
The
up about
Oh yeah,
5.
you put the full flyer up. We are having an event at the Colorado Capitol. I did mention it on January 6th at 1 p.m. We are going to have a race with people in costume. I want to see as many inflatable frogs as I can running up the hill to the Capitol to drag Donald Trump out of the Epstein Memorial Ballroom and put him on trial. And that is what we are going to do so that everybody remembers the insurrection and his part in it. And then we are going to follow that probably around 2 o'clock with a protest concert. And a little secret, there hasn't been a large protest concert yet. Like, think big name bands that, Woodstock, they plan it for a day and bands keep coming and they play for 3. We are hoping to plan something like that at the end of the fall, and this is a dry run to see if we can do it. So if you're interested in volunteering, particularly if you're interested in running up the hill, hit the volunteer link and let us know that you want to come in costume and do that. And that's all you need to do. It's a race straight up the hill, nothing complicated. You may have to say guilty when they bring charges up for him, but that's about it. If you want to volunteer for anything else, use the volunteer link. If you want more information about how to sign up and show, use the Mobilize link. So, Ken, I do not know of anything happening in other states. And we would be happy to help people organize it if they wanted to. But the whole reason we are doing this is we have not heard of anything going on in Denver or elsewhere regarding it, and I just felt we can't let that go. I can't sit there and do nothing because it's so momentous.
I really hope it can be on Free Speech TV so that everybody here can see it.
We are trying to get video of it. If nothing else, we will have somebody with a cell phone that is going to record it and put it up on our YouTube channel. Ideally, we want to get the race and the trial edited down and post it on his Truth Social so he sees it and tag him in it and get inside his head and make him crazy.
Oh, you just put it on X. He sees
Yeah.
everything there too.
Yep. All of it. So we'll get it out once we get video. And like I said, once we get video of it, it will go up on our YouTube channel. One of the things we're talking about is possibly even doing a YouTube live on it while it's going on, so people all over the country can see it too. Um, I'm sending you a DM, Ken. So that should show up in your chat. This is not something we are planning on people getting arrested over. Nothing we're doing is going to be anything other than free speech. I find the whole Antifa thing hysterical. Antifa simply means anti-fascist. If you are anti-fascist, you are Antifa. And I have no problem saying I am anti-fascist. We are not branding it as anti-Antifa because there is no Antifa to brand. There's no group, there's no organization, there's no logo to use. We're just calling it what it is, which is anti-fascist.
We do have a genius in the White House with his Trump University education, you know.
Well, so the other part of that is if this is going to get me on a list for the government, I will have been on that list since the 1980s. Like there's going to be a file that, if they can't figure out I'm doing what I'm doing, that's on them. And I fully expect at some point I can be labeled Antifa. I can be in jeopardy of being arrested just by doing what I'm doing. It depends on how far the dictatorship seizes power and what they are able to do. Clearly, he is already weaponizing the government against the opposition. I would fully expect it to continue, and I would expect it to escalate. I have also been saying this. At some point, there is going to be violence. At some point, the protests are going to have, police and riot SWAT beating people. And Donald Trump wants an excuse to do that. And to this point, he hasn't been able to because we have been nonviolent and haven't given him a reason to do it. But as soon as there's any inkling, and the threshold for what it's going to take to do that is going to get smaller and smaller as they get more and more desperate to commit acts of violence against the opposition to bolster their own support that they're doing something to beat those Democrats down. Fully expected. So no, I'm not afraid to be called Antifa. I'm not afraid to be called a Democrat. I am not afraid to be called a radical leftist because Ann Wagner called me that already. So I am who I am, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'm not afraid to say that. And they can label me however they want. And if they try and arrest me, I have arrangements. And I've already put that in plan. That's why we did an emergency preparedness lesson a few weeks ago. And that's the type of commitment this is going to take. And I understand that there are a lot of people that are uncomfortable putting themselves out publicly like that. And there is very good reason to remain anonymous so that the government doesn't single you out and arrest you. And those people need to be there too, so that when those of us who are out there get arrested, there's somebody to carry on. And there's somebody who can be anonymous and do some of the things that need to be done without triggering the government before those civil disobedience acts happen. All of it is necessary. And that's kind of, to Deborah's point, it's not what one tactic is going to work. It's that we need to be using all of the tactics we have at our disposal together, where there are some people who do mutual aid. There are some people who work on immigrant issues. There are some people who resist the government, and there are some people who try and get people elected. And we need to do all of it. And I can't do all of it. The people who want to work on getting Democrats elected in the midterms, I'm all for it. Go, we'll support you, we'll be there. I can't lead that. The people who are interested in mutual aid, I can give some people a car ride when they need it. I can give somebody a safe place to sleep, but it's not my specialty. And I would rather support the people who are good at doing that. The same, with immigrant rights issues. We sponsored a vigil for Jeanette Viscara a few weeks ago. But that's not my specialty. But we need people who do that in the movement. And that's where we need to build a wider and wider movement so that we can do all of these things, so that we can have somebody organize the trainings on what to do if, somebody's abusing you and react in a nonviolent way. And so that we can get all of these things done at the same time. And there will need to be priorities. There will be things we can't do. But it's important that we work together to get done what needs to get done to make the change that we want to see.